The Lord of the Rings, one of the most famous, well-known, epic trilogies of all time. And to overly simplify the story in a way that will probably offend the deep lovers of The Lord of the Rings, there are 3 books or movies for those who haven't read the books. Right there, that was probably an offensive statement to some. But the story follows Frodo's impossible quest to throw the ring into the fires of Mount Doom. That's it, the whole thing. Summary complete. Old books, old movies, so I'm offering a spoiler alert and no apology for spoiling the end. For those who know and remember the story, like I wonder if you recall like just how close Frodo's journey came to failing right as he was so close. By the end of the story, Frodo Baggins, the one who is chosen to carry the ring, is completely and utterly spent. He is crushed by the weight of the ring that he's been carrying. He physically, emotionally, spiritually exhausted. All of it has been too much for him. And at this point, at the very end, a single step forward is impossible. But Frodo wasn't alone. Because from the beginning, Frodo traveled with Samwise Gamgee, and Sam wasn't chosen. He never carries the ring. Most of the time, he's just there. Kind of walking behind Frodo, cooking meals, complaining a lot about how hungry he is and about how few potatoes they have. But in the end, at the moment when the entire mission it's hanging by a thread, when Frodo cannot take another step, Sam does something that changes the story. He looks at his friend and he says, I can't carry it for you. I can't carry the ring for you, but I can carry you. And then he lifts Frodo up. In that moment, the whole mission moves forward. Not because the so-called hero Frodo suddenly finds new strength, but because someone else was willing to step forward and carry the weight. It's this small moment in the scope of an epic trilogy that spans 12 movie hours. If you've ever watched them all at once, which I've only done twice, is so much time. If you love the battles and the kings and the great victories, I mean, this moment is so small that it like barely registers. But without it, the journey fails. The ring never reaches the fire. And I wonder how often it works this way. Not just in our favorite stories, but how often does it work this way in our lives? Even in the story of God unfolding in the scriptures and in our world, where sometimes the turning point doesn't come from the main character. Sometimes it comes from the one who steps forward and says, let me carry this. Let me take the cost. And when that happens, the mission moves forward. We've been living inside the story of Joseph for a few weeks now. And every week we've been tracking this gap between what God intends and what God's people actually do. And the gap feels massive often. And Joseph has been center stage and been demonstrating the wideness of this gap. A quick read through Genesis 37 through 50. If you've been reading along with this, you have felt this, that Joseph is like front and center. He appears to be the main character of this story, right? Because he's the one who has dreams. He's the one who suffers. He's the one who's raised to power. He's the one who rules, and he is the one who saves the world by feeding them in this time of famine. And so Joseph is like the man in charge, and he is often read by us, by Christians, as the hero of these chapters. But this morning, I want to help us notice that there is actually another story that is woven throughout Joseph's story that almost hides, like quietly in the background, that it's so easy to not notice. And it's the story of two of Joseph's brothers, Reuben and Judah. Both of these brothers, they show up at key moments in the larger story. And if you pay close attention to what they do and don't do, you actually start to see a pattern. And when you look at Reuben and Judah next to Joseph, we begin to see what it looks like when someone steps forward, when someone takes on the weight, the responsibility for others, and when they choose not to. And we'll start with Reuben. Reuben, the oldest brother. Oldest brothers are the best. Totally unbiased. In this family, and in this culture where Reuben is growing up, he has the most responsibility. Put on him by his culture, by his family. The expectations are high for him. He carries the weight of the family. When something goes wrong, Reuben is the one who is supposed to step up. He's the one expected to take care of things. And to his credit, sort of, we see Reuben giving off his very best eldest brother vibes whenever he shows up in the story. All the way back to the beginning, chapter 37, when the brothers collectively still want to kill Joseph, Reuben talks him down. Chapter 37, verses 21 and 22, we hear him say, "Let us not take his life, shed no blood. Throw him into this pit here in the wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him." We learn that Reuben has a secret plan to save his brother. We're told that he's going to come back later and rescue Joseph quietly. Now, Reuben may be the oldest, but he lacks the courage to even stand up to his brothers. I mean, he's willing to kind of say the easy part out loud, right? To say, killing our brother's a bad idea. But so he can walk them back from the most extreme plan, but they still want to harm him. And so Reuben, he goes along with their plan, pretending that he's fine with it. And he seems to justify it because, well, he has a plan, and he's going to come back later, and he's going to do the right thing, but he's going to do it when nobody's looking, when nobody will realize that he thwarted their plan, right? Because, like, we've already seen what a mob of brothers can do to one of them. Why make the brothers mad at me as well? And of course, Reuben doesn't imagine that in the time that he goes off and comes back, that Joseph will have already been sold off into slavery. But he returns and his brother is gone. And Reuben tears his clothes and he cries, "The boy is gone, and where shall I go?" It's an interesting response. Where shall I go? Right? Like, Reuben's brother is gone. And Reuben's concerned with himself. Where can I turn? Not, what have we done to our brother Joseph? But what is this going to mean for me? This is Reuben's first moment. But Reuben will have a second moment later in the story. And this will come years Later, Joseph has become the ruler of the world, and Joseph, he recognizes his brothers in front of him, and Joseph, he begins to use his power to mess with them because he can, right? And he demands that they bring their youngest brother Benjamin to him. But their father, Jacob, who already has lost one of his sons, refuses to let Benjamin go. But Reuben, mustering eldest brother responsibility, he steps forward. Again, sort of. Right? Because in Genesis 42:37, we hear Reuben say, "Kill my 2 sons if I do not bring Benjamin back to you. Put him in my hands, and I will bring him back to you." Kill my 2 sons. Like Samwise with Frodo, Reuben offers to carry Benjamin. Sort of, right? Reuben doesn't offer himself. He offers his 2 sons. The oldest brother, Reuben, the one expected to look out for his brothers, the one who was supposed to protect Joseph, he offers his kids in place of him. Reuben is willing to let others pay the price for his failure. And Jacob seems to know a bad deal when he sees it, because he essentially says, "No, thank you." Now, enter Judah. Judah is the 4th son, and apparently quite shrewd. Right where Reuben told his brothers not to kill Joseph because he planned to come rescue him later, Judah sees an opportunity. Back in 37, verses 26 through 7, we hear Judah say, what profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him. Yes, right? We solve a problem. But what do we really get out of it if Joseph's just gone? Why kill him when we could make money off of him? Yes, Jasmine, that's the exact appropriate response. Right? Judah, he kind of asks it as though it's a mercy, right? Because he says, well, let not our hand be upon him, for he's our own brother, our own flesh. Right? So if we don't kill him, that's fine, but let's sell him. In this story, we see who Judah is. And while this story seems to be about Joseph, the moment that he's sold into slavery, the narrator moves away from Joseph and zeroes in on Judah. And it's wild when you read Genesis. At this point, you're hooked on Joseph's story. He's just been sold into slavery. You're ready to see what happens to him. And then Judah gets a whole chapter. And it's a weird chapter. Genesis 38 is one of those chapters, especially in Genesis, but in the whole Bible, that really just makes most people really uncomfortable. It interrupts Joseph's story right as the action's going. Joseph is in slavery, but suddenly we're reading about Judah moving away from the family, and he's got all this family drama, and we're like, what does this have to do with anything? But the author of Genesis has put it here on purpose. Right between Judah proposing that they sell their brother, and then the family later trying to figure out what to do with their only remaining youngest brother. This chapter is here because Judah shows up in both places, and this chapter is showing us how Judah gets educated, how Judah is changed. And here's the Cliff Notes version of the weirdness of Genesis 38. Judah has 3 sons, and the oldest of his sons marries a woman named Tamar. And you might recognize Tamar's name because it shows up in the genealogy of Jesus. But the oldest marries Tamar, and then the oldest dies. Tamar's still there. And according to the customs of the time, the second son is supposed to marry Tamar then and provide for her. And the second son does marry her, but doesn't provide for her, and he dies too. And Judah's feeling a little concerned about all of his dying sons, probably assumes Tamar has something to do with it, and so he promises he'll marry his third son to Tamar, but Judah has no real intention of doing that, and he holds his son back. Judah has the cultural expectation of caring for his family. He is responsible for his family. He's responsible for making sure the next son provides for Tamar. She is part of his family. But Judah refuses to take responsibility, the responsibility that is his. And Tamar, a woman who at that time had no power, had no options, she devises a plan to expose Judah. And when Tamar's plan works and Judah is publicly humiliated, he sees what he's done. And he has what feels like one of the first moments of genuine moral clarity for this family. He looks at Tamar, this woman who has just sort of outed him publicly, and he says to her, "She is more righteous than I." He doesn't make excuses. He doesn't justify himself. He doesn't minimize what he's done. He doesn't blame anyone else. He names his own failure out loud in public. He risks his reputation and his honor. And for a family that is like built on deception and blaming, like this is a genuinely shocking moment. Judah learns something in Genesis 38 that none of his brothers have learned yet. What it means to take responsibility. Judah had an obligation. He owed Tamar, but he refused to step forward until now. And so Judah came into this story as a man selling his brother for a profit. And Judah leaves this story saying, I was wrong. I owe this. I will pay it. Fast forward to Genesis 43. Joseph, ruler of Egypt, has been playing with his brothers, messing with them, yanking them around, running them through these tests. Joseph has demanded that they bring Benjamin to Egypt, but their father Jacob won't let it happen. Reuben has just offered his sons in place of Benjamin, but Jacob's like, that's not the answer here. But now Judah steps forward. Judah says this to his dad. Genesis 43, 8 through 9, Judah says, "Send the boy with me. I will be a pledge of his safety. From my hand you shall require him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, then let me bear the blame forever." Big. That's huge. But as we know, talk can be cheap. It doesn't cost us much to say things out loud. It's easy to say this, but at least Judah puts himself out there in a way that Reuben doesn't. Judah, as the fourth of the brothers, he steps forward. And Jacob accepts. Judah and his brothers, they return to Joseph, and they have Benjamin with him. But once again, Joseph isn't done messing around with him, and he tries to set Benjamin up so that he could be arrested and imprisoned. And this is where Judah then gets to live out his words, where his yes becomes a lived yes, right? Judah doesn't offer Joseph his children. He doesn't offer Joseph money. He doesn't look for an easy way out or shrink from the danger. Judah he gives a speech, and it's one of the longest speeches by any person in Genesis. And he recounts all that they've been through and the pain that their father will suffer if anything happens to Benjamin. But then he says this in Genesis 44, verses 32 through 33, he says, I became a pledge of safety for the boy to my father, saying, if I do not bring him back to you, then I shall bear the blame before my father all my life. Now therefore, please let me remain instead of the boy as a servant to you, and let the boy go back with his brothers. Let me stay. Let the boy go. I will be the slave so he can be free. The man who once proposed selling a brother into slavery now offers himself as a slave so that his brother can go home. Judah has nothing to gain from this. He owes Benjamin nothing as the fourth brother. Benjamin wasn't his responsibility until he stepped forward and he took him on. He goes beyond what anyone would have expected of him. And this act is so beautiful. It is so powerful that Joseph is broken by it. The very next line says, then Joseph could no longer control himself. He wept aloud. I am Joseph. Is my father alive? Come near me, please. Joseph has spent so much effort trying to hurt his brothers, scaring them, confusing them, causing them anxiety and stress. But when he watches Judah offer his own freedom for his brother's life, something breaks open in him. Joseph is ready to reconcile with his brothers finally. And he repents, he turns away from his games, not because the games were somehow successful, but because God's kindness has a way of changing us. I want to put Joseph and Judah side by side for a moment because the contrast is important. Joseph, with all of his power, he saves the world. He administers a food program. And he does something genuinely great. But really, it didn't cost him anything. Right? He already has the power. He has someone else's food to give out. And he distributes it with conditions and costs. He uses his power for gain. While Joseph saves the world, Judah saves his family. And it costs him everything. Judah has no power. He has no food. He has nothing to offer except himself. Joseph's generosity cost him almost nothing. Judah's generosity costs him everything he has. Joseph feeds the world with Egypt's bread, but Judah offers his own life for one brother. And it is Judah who carries God's blessing forward, not Joseph. Right? The ruler to come out of this family, the good ruler who will rule both the heavens and the earth. Like a good shepherd, he will come from the family of Judah, the one who stepped forward with nothing and said, take me instead. That is the kind of king that God has been teaching his people to long for from the very beginning. And we have the privilege of knowing the name of this king, right? Because Jesus was not born a son of Joseph. Jesus is a son of Judah. Jesus comes into the world with no earthly power, no political position, no grain resources. He has only himself and his Father's love. And when the moment comes, when the accusations are made, when someone has to stay behind so that the rest can go free, Jesus steps forward. Not with conditions, not with tests, not with games. He steps forward and he says, "Take me so that they can go free. Let them go. I will be the slave so that they can be free." The cross is Judah's speech in Genesis 44. Lived out in full, not just for one brother, but for the whole world. Can you hear the question on Jesus' lips? How can I go back to my Father if they are not with me? The they being us. That's the question Jesus answers on Good Friday, and the answer costs him everything. This leaves us kind of with two questions hanging out there for us to respond to in prayer, conversation with God. The first is, have you been so powerfully moved by the sacrifice of Jesus that you could no longer contain yourself? That you found yourself ready to be embraced by God and your new family? When was that moment for you? It's so important that we remember that moment. And if we haven't had it yet, to let ourselves face and hear and be confronted by the beauty of this kind of gift, the sacrifice. The God who loves us gave himself for us. And the second question as a response to that is, will you step forward, taking responsibility for others when it's not technically your obligation? Like maybe culturally, legally, you have no responsibility. But because love has captured you, because love has possessed you, you can't help but begin to take on others. And so there's a couple ways to think about it. Will you step up like Reuben did, volunteering others to pay the price? Well, will you kind of stay relative comfort and safety? Will you play games with your power like Joseph, who sees people he needs to be made right with, but refuses to do the work to make things right because you don't have to, and you're enjoying things as they are a bit too much? Or will we step forward like Judah, saying, "Take me. I will offer my life as the price"? And the reality is most of us will never be asked to give our actual lives. But most of us are asked every day in ordinary ways to give up something we'd rather keep in order to carry someone else. It might be our time or our comfort or our pride. It might be our right to be angry, to make others pay, our carefully protected sense of fairness. Right? Judah's transformation didn't happen overnight. He had to learn through failure, through being exposed, through saying, "I was wrong," out loud. But then those lessons had to be lived. And this transformation is available to us all as we come into contact with the same grace that transformed Judah. The Son of Judah has already stepped forward for us. Thanks be to God. And we come to the table this morning to celebrate that gift, to receive that gift, and to give thanks again to Jesus for offering his life in our place when we didn't deserve it.